Before we get to your scheduled video, please remember that likes and comments tell YouTube to promote our work to other people, and subscribing to the channel tells you when something new drops. You can also head to the link tree in the description to peruse my books, join us on Discord, or support us on Patreon. You can get episodes of Journey of Wrestling and Violent Profiles early, as well as a load of other treats. Even just $1 a month earns you a name drop for being cool. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Greetings and salutations, Thomas Hayden Church and others. It is I, Eric J. Chucky, joined as always by the boy.
Hey.
This is the Two Nerds Podcast. Today we are talking about the Twisted Metal TV series. But before we talk about the Twisted Metal TV series that you can watch streaming on Peacock, we want to talk about who's cool.
Oh, I know somebody. Passion Killer 711.
I have met a cool person named Rob.
I know a guy from Ohio. Separately, a guy from Ohio is one of the people who is cool.
That is true. And yes, you know at least one guy from Ohio.
At least one.
And Distrucity KTL, also very cool. It's right there in the name.
Psychic.
If you were on the Discord, you'd know.
You'd know.
Hello. I'm dying. So are you.
Twisted Metal is a very silly video game series about cars blowing each other up with missiles. It has some of the most unnecessarily deep and complex lore for a car that is about, for a game that is about cars blowing each other up with missiles.
I didn't really get into Twisted Metal until Black, and I think that's true of a lot of people, because it was just such a big, iconic game.
And Black is so tonally different from the rest of the series.
Yeah. But I have done a lot of research on it. I actually, ironically, we'll get to this in an eventual episode of Violent Profiles, spoiler alert, but I spent a lot of time in my teens on a website I'm not sure exists anymore that was basically like a wikia for Twisted Metal that was curated by, I think, one person who just really loved collecting the character bios and stuff. It essentially was a text version of Violent Profiles. And it really, inspired me. And I learned about these characters was really cool. And I was, what's the word I'm looking for? Hesitant but enthusiastic about this program.
I don't know why it didn't occur to me that the Twisted Metal as a series is almost tailor-made for Violent Profiles, but
oh yeah,
I'm actually jazzed.
It's going to be literal years, but it's on docket eventually.
So anyway, I barely had any feelings about this program because I'm not really a humongous fan of Twisted Metal. I've played some of the games. I'm vaguely aware of some of the lore, but not much of it on account of the lore is very weirdly deep.
It's kind of funny because I wouldn't categorize myself as a huge Twisted Metal fan, but comparatively speaking,
between the two of us, you are a huge Twisted Metal fan.
Well, and I feel like in the grand scheme of things, I'm probably in the top 20%, even though I haven't played the games that much, all things considered.
Yeah, that's how it be sometimes.
It's weird.
I was only really began to give a shit about this series when I heard they cast Samoa Joe as Sweet Tooth.
I was excited to see that Anthony Mackie was pushing so hard to get it made because I like him.
I like him too. I like Anthony Mackie more than I like Falcon. And this version, Anthony Mackie in this series has a lot more of his personality coming through, and I like that.
Yeah. Spoiler-free review. It was, I think I will paraphrase a review I saw online.
Okay.
This series should not be this good.
That is a great way of putting it. I will say that Twisted Metal has the right tone for the thing it's adapting, in that it is unafraid of adapting serious material in a fundamentally unserious way. It doesn't take itself seriously, even when it's covering, people being blown up and stuff. And I like that. That fits what I expected from the adaptation.
Unless it does.
But
there's this ebb and flow to things where it makes sense when it makes sense.
It's got a good rhythm, it's got good tone, and I mean, to be frank, if you can see our thumbnail right now, if that looks at all interesting to you, you're gonna like the series.
Yeah. That was the spoiler-free version.
Yep, time to talk spoilers.
Yeah, let's talk spoilers about Twisted Metal. I really enjoyed this more than I thought I was going to, especially after those first that big teaser where they revealed Will Arnett's Sweet Tooth voice. Which, let's go ahead and get this out of the way. Samoa Joe could have done that part. We understand how Hollywood works, and Will Arnett put a lot of money into this, and he did a great job. But
yeah, look, Will Arnett's performance as the voice of Sweet Tooth was good. No knocking it. I liked it even. It's very charming and funny and has the right undertone of being, look at the screen. But Samoa Joe would have done just as good a job.
You hired 2 actors when you only needed to hire 1.
I've seen Samoa Joe. He's one of the best promos in the business. He could have done this. I know all Sweet Tooth's lines in the series. There wasn't anything he wouldn't have been able to pull off just fine. But Hollywood is Hollywood is. Will Arnett's a very marketable name, and he put a bunch of money into the show. And more to the point, he did a fine job.
Yeah. I'm not mad about it.
But Sweet Tooth is being carried by his very powerful physical performance.
Release the Samoa Joe cut.
Release the Samoa... Because, he did the lines. They had to react to something on set.
It would have been kind of funny if they just stood around staring at him.
As he mimed?
As he was silently miming everything, yeah.
I saw an interview with him where he said that he didn't hang out with much of the rest of the cast because when you look like that, he didn't need to really get into character. The world got into character around him.
Yeah. He's very intimidating.
He's a big motherfucker.
And it's interesting how they translated the Twisted Metal Black look of Sweet Tooth so well. Every corner of that could have messed up. Spoiler alert: in the final episode, they show off the Dollface gang. I prefer that as a single character, but this is fine too. They look a little hokey.
There were so many, I'm aware, way more, this is a character from the Twisted Metal games that we're putting in the show than I noticed. And I noticed a lot.
Yeah, that was fun too. But they could have messed this costume up, and they didn't. They nailed it. And
yeah, you're right. The Dollface gang, they looked a little arch, but I felt it was intentionally.
The mask looked a little, I looted this from a mall.
I felt like it was supposed to.
And that's okay. It's not where I would have taken the character personally, but it's fine.
Whereas this is just perfect.
Yeah, you have taken every note. It would have been really easy to make him Big Joker.
And he wasn't, and that's important.
No, he's like an amalgamation of all of the sweet teeth.
There's lots.
Throughout the Twisted Metal franchise. He looks like the black one. From Twisted Metal Black.
Right. So, let's talk about some other aspects of the series.
Okay.
Anthony Mackie does great. His character is John Doe. You, as our Twisted Metal guru here, is that the name of the character who drives Roadkill?
Why you gotta put me on the spot, man? I don't have research notes.
If we don't know, we don't know.
Off the top of my head, I don't. John Doe is a character.
Okay. He starts out driving a different car that he loves, named Evelyn. This is a huge spoiler for the series, so we are in the spoiler territory. Eventually that car is destroyed, and we bring in Roadkill. One of the things I literally went, I knew that from the video game, internally.
He drives Roadkill in black, yes.
Perfect.
I need to cycle back a little bit here since we're getting to this part now. So, the thrust of the show, I expected a fun, goofy, post-apocalyptic, violent romp. And I got that. What I did not expect was to weep openly about a car, and I've seen about half of Supernatural.
Yeah, they make you, Evelyn doesn't make it to the end of the series, and that is a big spoiler. But they make you feel that shit.
And it's so weird how they manage to... So they're evoking this late 90s, early 2000s soundtrack because that's the only music that still exists because of when the apocalypse happened. And they manage to use these like super popular songs that shouldn't be able to evoke emotion in that way, but they drop needles so well.
It's not quite to the same tier. It's not done as well, but it's the same sort of thing that Guardians of the Galaxy does.
Sure, yeah.
Where they take songs that were very popular in their day and recontextualize them in a powerful way.
Yeah. This was an absurdly well put together show for how stupid the concept is.
And this concept is stupid. I recognize that. But I love it. I love how unironic they present it.
And another thing I like is how unflappable the characters are, because this is their life.
Yeah.
No one's horrified, really, unless it's, like, personally horrifying to them. No one is like, oh, look at humanity has come, blah, blah, blah. No, they're used to it now. It's fine.
This is just the world.
Yeah. They go a little, well, that's fucked up, and they make a joke and move on.
And one of the things I love about the series is that the series isn't overly concerned with minutia. It has been, I believe, something on the order of 20 years since the apocalypse happened. All the gas is still good, there's still plenty of bullets for the guns, and the power is on in most of the buildings. And you know what? I don't need to know why. It's not important. That's not what the show's about.
If this were a Fallout-style video game, I would expect there would be an NPC somewhere who would explain to me
why these things are the case.
But we don't talk to that NPC.
No, because the story isn't interested in that.
No.
The story is interested in people in cars. Well, actually, the story is interested in people having fistfights and teasing people in cars murdering each other for the most part. There is a glorious, wonderful sequence at the end where there is a big twisted metal car fight. But if you came here, if you are the people who went to see 2014 Godzilla and were mad that it was not just wall-to-wall giant lizard fight, I want to warn you, this is not wall-to-wall car fight. This is mostly a personal story, and the cars act for the most of the show as cars, as transportation devices, plot devices, not combat set pieces. A lot of the combat is personal. It is, TV show fist fight combat.
Well, if you're just going to have episode after episode of cars fighting each other, you will have an audience for that, but it's not going to be as wide as the reach of what they did.
I'm not saying what they did is bad. I am saying that if you are the type of person who was mad at 2014 Godzilla, go back and listen to our podcast for that. It's bad. But if you did, you would know I'm not that person. That's fine. But if you are, I'm warning you, do not expect to get your cool car fight until the finale. But they do build up for it well. They tease all the various cars that are going to be in the big car fight, and they build them up, and they make it hype, and then the big car fight happens, and it's cool.
It is exceptionally cool. And it starts with Cake, which was...
I actually literally did like a fist bump in the air.
I was very, very excited.
Because it's like my favorite song of theirs too.
It's a really good one. And that was something I listened to, when I was young. So it did that whole nostalgia bait thing. This is a difficult show to talk about without doing what we call here the Guardians of the Galaxy podcast.
Which is just quoting it.
And just talking about how great all of the stuff was. Okay, you know what? Let's be nitpicky shitheads. What was something you didn't like about the show?
Well, there is the one thing.
True.
So, in the grand tradition of the podcast, we're going to do what we call a compliment sandwich. I have, up until this point, been very complimentary of this show. I have gone to great lengths to highlight all the things I love about it. There is one thing I do not like about this show. It is important to note, it is literally like the one thing I don't like about this show. But I really don't like it. So I'm going to explain it. We haven't mentioned, until now, the character of Quiet. Character played by the lady who played Rosa Diaz on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Stephanie Beatriz. She has her own character arc. She's really cool. She's got her own thing going on.
Yeah, she's really fun.
John Doe, cool character, kind of a goofball, kind of played like a comedy protagonist in that he's only allowed to be cool when it wouldn't be funnier for him to be a loser. In that case, he is a loser. And that sometimes is a problem in an action comedy where you don't allow your action protagonist to be cool enough to carry the action part of things.
I think where they sell that character is in watching other people fail at doing what he does effortlessly.
It's made very clear that he's pretty good at other parts of being alive in the apocalypse. Surviving, know-how, getting into fist fights, that stuff. Where he excels is behind the wheel. And in the Twisted Metal adaptation, that's what you want.
And in watching his own ass. Like, he tends to go, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea, and he's almost always right.
Yep. He's a survivor, and I like that about him. There is, they have sort of a very enemies to lovers AU sort of vibe. They start out...
Go to a coffee shop.
They start out. They do go to a burger place.
Yeah.
They start out as trying to kill each other. By the end of the series, they end up as like a romantic couple. Blah blah blah. There's a bit in the middle.
Very toward the end, really.
That's true. It's after they're a couple. It has been made very clear over the course of the series that John Doe is very attached to, not just, he doesn't just know that he needs a car, he's attached to his car. For very personal reasons that they don't really get into until this whole thing happens. A thing happens, the car is taken from them, they have to go get it back. And then there comes a point when John's character has to choose between Quiet, his new romantic interest, who he's known for less than a week, or his car, his stalwart companion that's been with him his whole life. He chooses the car, and she gets mad at him for it. This would be totally understandable if there weren't for one small thing. It's her fault. Entirely and completely, he did nothing wrong. It is entirely her fault that they lost the car. And they lost the car because she was being a disrespectful shithead about something that was important to him.
I do think there is another wrinkle here, and it's less that he didn't choose her and more that he went into excess danger. I think they made it pretty clear in her dialogue after they, are talking again, that it's not so much that he picked the car over her, it's that he picked the car over his own safety. And that hurts her feelings, and, she has damage about that.
Because she has some very understandable trauma that happens earlier in the series that is totally reasonable why she would react very poorly to this. But it was entirely her fault, and it was a series of events that started with her being an asshole to him on, like, a really deeply personal level. And then, she does, one shitty half-hearted apology about it. And it leads to, the equivalent of his dog dying, to put it in a good emotional context. And she has the gall to be mad at him about it, and then more so, he apologizes. And the narrative is structured as such that it is clear that the narrative considers him to be the one in the wrong here.
I don't know that I agree with that last part. I can accept that as an interpretation, but I don't necessarily know that that's, I don't think the narrative pushes that very strongly. He does apologize. He accepts responsibility. I see this as a little bit more as two very flawed characters. He who has never really been attached to anyone, and she who has lost recently and is not mentally great in the first place because of, the apocalypse.
Right. And her just torturous existence before this.
He apologizes when he doesn't need to smooth things over and keep a person in his life that he never thought he wanted until he had it. And she doesn't know how to be vulnerable enough to admit fault. These are toxic traits.
Yeah, that's basically that my issue is that the narrative, at least from my interpretation, from what I saw and can absorb, at no point acknowledges that what she did was shitty.
Maybe. And we spoke about this before, and I said it's an interesting build-up to a character change with her in the final episode, where she makes a large sacrifice for him, for what is better for him, and you know,
yeah,
it shows
it's
character
not like it
growth.
ruins the show for me. It is essentially one half of most of one episode and a little bit of the episode before it. But it really fucking bothers me. I don't like that trope. And
No.
it is a very, very common trope in fiction.
Yeah, I don't care for the trope either. I don't know. I guess I don't write myself into this specific corner. I like to write people who are reasonable, but these people aren't reasonable.
No, and they don't live in reasonable circumstances.
No, they don't. So, like, I don't like it either. It put a damper on things, I guess, but it's...
Well, it's just...
I've certainly seen worse.
If the goal is to be a nitpicky asshole, this is my nitpick.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a great way to bring that back around, because I would say this is also probably the only real part of the show that I didn't care for. I guess the only other thing is, like... people don't seem to die well, and there's not a lot given to why.
I don't know what you mean.
Like, again, we're getting into the spoilers here. If you're still around, what did you do? Agent Stone gets blown up, and then the next episode, she's like, "Well, did you check if he was dead?" He's like, "Nah, he's probably alive," and he is. He's fine.
Well, I mean, this is clearly, like... This is Twisted Metal universe.
Sure.
People are very tough here.
Yeah. It's like that's the only real part that stretched my suspension of disbelief. And it's a similar thing happens with Sweet Tooth and I think one other character where they probably should have died, but they didn't, just because it wasn't on screen. Like
They clearly, like, John Doe, one of the reasons he's a good survivor is he's genre savvy. He knows what kind of show he's in.
yeah, I mean that's fair too.
And I didn't see him die. I didn't see his corpse. He's probably alive.
Yeah. And it's funny. Like it's not. Again, this is
And that's why that happens. Is that's the comedy portion.
Right. Yeah. This is me being nitpicky for the sake of filling our half hour, because we can't just sit here and talk about how great it is the whole time, because that's not. I run out of things to say.
I will say this does a good. This is a great road trip movie. This is a good road trip show. Because it does what a good road trip piece of media should, and it takes you on a tour of the world these characters are living in, and you see lots of different people in lots of different circumstances, and how people are existing in this over the top, somewhat camp post-apocalypse, where a big man in a bondage harness and a clown mask is the one who runs Las Vegas, and he's the only one there.
I really love the way they interpreted all the lore. Like, it just works so fundamentally that if the writers said they did it on accident, I would believe them. Like, it connects so smoothly that this could be the kind of thing that you just sort of let fall into place. Or they could have worked their asses off to try to make sure it was really fucking coherent. Both things are possible, but it's so cool and interesting, and
it takes internal verisimilitude as more important than logical reality, and that's a great decision because that's more important in a piece of media, in a piece of fiction. Internal verisimilitude is more important than adherence to logical reality. It doesn't matter if there are dragons. It matters that the dragons make sense within the universe that exists.
Yeah. And this show pulls that off very well.
Like, why are a bunch of people in the post-apocalypse, instead of doing the obviously better thing and like joining up with a community and trying to get by, dressing up in car tires and calling themselves vultures and having big Mad Max car fights? Because that's sort of the vibe. Like, that's why one of them even mentions he doesn't like wearing tires. He thinks it's silly and impractical. But if you're gonna be a vulture, that you gotta wear the uniform. And I like that.
If the apocalypse happened and we didn't have a healthy amount of Mad Max style raiders, I'd be upset.
I would feel cheated.
Yeah.
I would feel slighted. I would feel like I hadn't gotten the apocalypse I had earned.
The entire time we had a society, you fuckers couldn't agree on one thing, but now you're like, oh, we're banded together and working toward a better world. Fuck off.
I think this is the speech of someone who would be a vulture.
That or a giant clown in an ice cream truck.
Yep. I think final thoughts.
Well, let's fold final thoughts into the idea of what do you think about this show getting a second season? Because right now, because of the various strikes going on, we don't know.
I hope it does. On account of they teased the thing that it's actually an adaptation of, the Twisted Metal tournament as season 2.
Yeah.
It's a whole last season on the origin story of the people who are supposed to be in the thing you're adapting. Bold choice.
I think it's a pretty common choice by this point. Especially if you're
building. I mean, they're building a Twisted Metal television universe.
Yeah, and I think they did a good job. I'm a little afraid that they won't be able to bring it home after season 2. I think it'll still be pretty good, but if they get a second season, I'm pretty sure I'm going to not be as interested by the third or fourth.
Yeah, I don't know that this is a show with 6 seasons and a movie shelf life.
No, I don't think so.
I think this would benefit much better from the British model of television series where you get your 2, you're done.
And honestly, if it doesn't get another season, as sad as I would be, because I would like to spend a little more time with these characters and see what they want to do with Calypso in the tournament, this was okay. It's okay to have just been a 1-season thing.
I think it would be hearkening back to an older era, to an era before the MCU. If they do this whole thing, they tease the Twisted Metal tournament at the end, and we never get a season 2. That is such a adaptational works before the MCU thing to fucking happen that it would almost be funny.
And the irony is, it's entirely just because of the strikes. I feel like if the strikes were not going on right now, this would have already been greenlit for a second season. Audience reaction has been great. Critical, not so much. But
who cares about them? We, as people who are currently engaged in the art of film critique, our opinion doesn't matter.
We have so many really good lines to end the podcast on. We got still 4 fucking minutes to fill.
All right, so you guys aren't in this room. You can't feel the tension as both of us angle for when do we all right, the blackout line. Who's getting it? What is it going to be? There's so many good quotes. But final thoughts on this is this was really fun. This was a funny show. Mm-hmm. That had enough heart and emotional commitment to its very silly premise that it managed to land what would otherwise be a unlandable plane.
This is the kind of shit I came up with in high school, and wouldn't it be cool if someone made a real thing out of this? Not just that it's Twisted Metal, but some of the ideas for the gangs that weren't canon, and some of the ideas for the interpretations of the characters. The way they did Preacher was really funny and cool. It was just neat. It was the exact kind of stuff I loved to take in then. Very Robert Rodriguez style, goofy action horror comedy thing.
Absolutely. I think it has really... Anyone you've probably noticed this if you've listened to enough of the podcast, and if you know me personally, you definitely know this. One of my favorite aspects of any piece of fiction is the world building. This series has really good adaptational world building, and it also has original material that makes for a very interesting and open and intriguing setting that you want to see things happen in.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do. That's harder to do than it seems like it might be if you've never tried to do it.
Well, and especially when you're adapting something that coming up with your own thing, that is hard, but translating something to be what it is, evocative of the soul of the franchise or whatever you're doing, but still be useful in the adaptation, because you cannot just do the Twisted Metal games as a TV show. That's BattleBots, and it's been canceled 3 times now.
They keep bringing it back. But you can't... adaptation is a hard thing to do. As someone who's... Most of the stuff I do creatively, you people will never see. Because it's all D&D. I DM. And one of the things I do as a DM is I adapt stuff. I do, as I usually say it, I steal things that I like from fiction and make them fit into the world while still feeling like themselves, still getting the same vibe across, because that's what's important to me. So I am familiar with how hard this is to do, and they simultaneously nailed the characterization of the various people that I'm aware of from Twisted Metal, and I have to assume the other people as well, well enough that they feel like those characters and they fit into this larger world that they made to, like, serve the narrative that they had in mind is a wonderful little trick.